Hello, everyone. Henry Emmons and my colleagues here.
I'm Dr. Tim Culbert.
I'm Amy Prasek.
And then tonight, we are joined by one of my dearest friends who I've worked with for over 25 years. Kaya and I started teaching mindfulness together way back when. And we've done some really interesting things together. We led a retreat called Learning to Love Well. We did a year-long program called A Year of Living Mindfully. We just have a lot of history and go back a long ways. Kaya is a mindfulness instructor. She studies and teaches about ritual, and she embodies the love and caring for the earth and all beings who inhabit the earth. To me, Kaya is like a wiser, more evolved sister, and I'm so happy that you're here with us tonight, Kaya. Thank you for joining us. So we have covered a lot of ground in the last 8 weeks. We've tried to weave together the complexity of being human in an uncommonly difficult time. We've talked a lot about body and the mind and emotions. And tonight, or last night, we want to finish on what we hope is a high note by focusing on heart and trying to point towards the next step on the path to hope. So I want to open with a poem by one of my all-time favorite poets, whose name is Hafiz. He lived and wrote many centuries ago, but you'll see how pertinent this poem is to us today. It's called If It Is Not Too Dark. Go for a walk if it is not too dark. Get some fresh air. Try to smile. Say something kind to a safe-looking stranger if one happens by. Always exercise your heart's knowing. You might as well attempt something real along this path. Take your spouse or lover into your arms the way you did when you first met. Let tenderness pour from your eyes the way the sun gazes warmly on the earth. Play a game with some children. Extend yourself to a friend. Sing a few ribald songs to your pets and plants. Why not let them get drunk and wild? Let's toast every rung we've climbed on evolution's ladder. Whisper, I love you to the whole mad world. Let's stop reading about God. We will never understand God. Jump to your feet, wave your fists, threaten and warn the whole universe that your heart can no longer live without real love. It is almost as if Hafiz were giving us advice today for how to be during this pandemic. He says, go for a walk, get some fresh air, try to smile, say something kind to a safe-looking stranger, maybe one that's wearing their mask. And he's also referring to our evolution and pointing toward a way for us to emerge from this time of unnatural isolation. Again, quoting the poem, warn the whole universe that your heart can no longer live without real love. So in an earlier session, you may remember I referred to what's known as the first arrow, and that really means simply the trials and the tribulations that come from simply being alive. It's the struggles in life that we cannot avoid. If we think of this coronavirus experience as a first arrow, as part of being alive right now that we cannot avoid, I wonder if we could use it as a springboard for future growth. And I want to explore that with Kaya here, wondering how can we evolve as a human species as we come out of this pandemic And is it possible for us to become somehow larger than we were before it?
Well, happily, all the wisdom traditions give us guidance for facing into times of enormous fear like this one. Buddha is a good example. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree to reach enlightenment. And Mara, who was a fierce symbol of all the fears that humans can face, came directly to confront him. As Buddha looked into the face of Mara, all the fears, Buddha put his hand down to touch Earth, Mother Earth, his connection with all of life, all humans, all other species, life since the beginning of time on this planet, life that would go on after him, and touching into that vast web of connection. He knew that he was safe.
I love that, just that image of Buddha touching, literally physically touching the earth.
Yeah.
Just last week we spoke about emotional storms, the times we get swept off our feet by things that are just so overwhelmingly hard, and talked about the importance of getting grounded and finding a way to stay grounded. And it's just so interesting that all those years ago, the story is that was something Buddha did when confronted with those intense fears.
Right, yeah. And it's something that we can practice now. So just for a moment, you could imagine a situation coming up today or tomorrow in which your fear gets really triggered by news that you hear or story of a friend who's having a really hard time. And when that fear comes up, just turn to what the Buddha did and touch your own knowing that we all are related, that there is this marvelous interbeing that we are coming to know. This is really, this pandemic is the way it's happening to us in the 21st century. It's bringing humans into a connection with our interbeing that we've never known before. So for me, I just touch my heart and I remember that we're all related. If I'm in a store and someone's making fun of me wearing a mask, which happened not too long ago, I just kind of closed one hand and breathed into the soles of my feet as a way to go, we're all related. And then I asked him not to make fun of my mask because it was what I was doing to help make people safe. So just one little example, but again, we can each use the Buddha's teaching at times like this.
So I think it might be helpful for us to maybe talk a little more about what we even mean when we talk about heart or about heartfulness. And I want to say that, to me, it is no longer a vague concept. It's not just an idea or a metaphor, but it feels like a very literal and powerful thing and a powerful part of me. Earlier in another session, I had shared a little bit about one of my stories of struggling with a decision and using this feeling of opening or a feeling of closing as a way to help guide my decision. And over the years, I've really come to rely on that and see that as it's really a feeling of my heart opening or my heart closing. And it's maybe not literally the physical beating heart here on the left side of your chest, but it is this area, I think, right here in the center of our being, that if we learn to just turn our attention toward it, simply directing our awareness there, we can really sense the current state of our being, our degree of openness, our degree of capacity for love in that moment. How do you teach that, Kaya, or how do you practice it for yourself? Just that coming to know the part of ourselves that we call the heart.
Oh, that's a fun one. Henry and I have spent many evenings together talking about just things like this. So I think a couple things I'll say. One is that I often go to the idea of a lotus flower, opening when one petal opens and the next one can open. When one closes and the next one kind of closes. So I think similar to the story that Henry shared, I think it was last week or the week before, when I'm in a place where I'm in relationship with someone, and I'm really reaching for the new kind of relationships that are becoming possible for us. I do check in with my heart, and I ask it to open as far as it can feel safe at this time, and then I accept whatever happens, and then I work with it again the next moment that I think of that. Also, this is a little bit of a segue, but I think something that is helpful in this time is, I think for many of us, our minds, our poor minds, are having a hard time. They've been trained to be in control, to be as perfect as possible, to plan for the future, to be efficient at choice making, and they really can't do any of that now. So what I'm doing pretty much each day is taking some time to just look at my mind. I look at what my mind is not able to do anymore, what it's worried about, and I kind of come into my heart, breathe a little bit into my heart, and I let my heart just feel how hard it is for the mind. So I actually kind of cuddle the mind a little bit each day, just knowing that, yeah, this time of uncertainty makes the mind feel like it's not serving us well. It's not doing what it trained so hard to be able to do to keep us safe. And so this is a time, and then I turn to the heart, because the heart has a capacity to hold trouble in the way that the mind doesn't. The heart doesn't need to come up with solutions. It can really just be there with the feeling and trust that as I'm with the feeling, I'm then validating what's happening to the mind. And the mind doesn't feel so lonely, and it feels seen, heard, recognized. So then it can go on and again, the next day kind of face into knowing, oh, I can't really plan for the future anymore. So I think that this time is bringing us many gifts, and we're going to talk about a couple of them tonight. I think one is the possibility of a different relationship between the heart and the mind, one in which the mind kind of learns to serve the heart, because the heart has got a greater trust in how to move forward, because we know now in a way we didn't before that we're all deeply connected. And that speaks to the fact that because we're all so related, we have access to relationship possibilities that we never knew before. So I'll stop here, Henry, so you can jump in again. And then there's something else I'd like to say about what the virus has taught us about the heart. So, but
Well,
take it.
I'll just share with you that when you're talking, it reminded me of this. Just this morning on my morning walk, I finished listening to my latest audiobook, which was called Being Human. And it was, I think, subtitled Life Lessons from a Neurobiologist or something like that. So it's my favorite writer of this type, Robert Sapolsky, and he had these 12 talks, 12 lessons about what it is to be human, and most of them were very biologically focused. It was very scientific, brain science kind of stuff. But his final talk, and really the epitome of what he thinks it is to be human, he talked all about heart. And it's not a very hard scientific turn in that way. And it was just really interesting to me that we are so good at thinking, and we so tend to intellectualize and think through our problems, try to figure out what's wrong, what can we do to fix it, that we have to really practice what you're referring to, which is this it's almost more like an inclusion of the heart, not letting the mind run the show by itself, because it's really missing some important information and important ways of being. But when we can weave those two together, the mind and the heart, and put them on more or less equal terrain, we might really feel and live in a very different way.
Well, one of the things that has really caught my attention with this virus that is just gives me a lot of curiosity and wonder about how we can go forward in the future is that we know that the virus, shocked our bodies into realizing that we're all vulnerable to this mysterious illness, regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, income level. We share a vulnerability that we didn't know before. Maybe our ancestors knew it from an earlier plague, but we haven't known that in the same way. And our technology lets us know that every human is experiencing this. So just on that note, see if you can come inside your body for a moment and just ask it if it remembers when it realized almost on a physiological level that this vulnerability to the virus connected it to every other human body. Maybe so much time has gone on that your body doesn't remember, but I know for me, there was just kind of a jolt throughout the body and a wonder. And I think what that has done is, as this knowing of our interrelationship has been felt in the body and then be able to move up through the physical system, it's also tapped into some of our other wisdom centers, our emotional intelligence, our hearts, our kind of knowing, and it's allowing us then to have a profound new understanding of interbeing that we humans have never had before. So we can each now play with this idea that allows us to recognize more relational possibilities with everyone, strangers, friends. I remember when Catherine Duncan said that she got on Zoom with some friends and they just sat in silence for a couple of moments just to take in their friendship. And I've done that with a class too, where we just listened to each person talk about how they were experiencing this time of the virus. And we witnessed the exquisiteness of being in the presence of another human as they shared what it was that they were kind of understanding about our connection now. And we practice listening without judgment. And so I think all of us know we're just having more intimacy now with strangers. You pass, maybe there's a look between them, or maybe you say hello to someone you went to before. More intimacy with pets, with nature, these deeper connections. And I'm trusting that we are just at the beginning of coming to understand the deeper relational possibilities of recognizing that we are all in this together, and that love, caring about the welfare of beings we'll never meet, caring about our loved ones, that we can do that in ways that really, really take into account the kind of how life is living through each of us and the beauty of that connection.
Well, that's really where this experience ties in with hope, isn't it? That maybe something about this has, I don't know if it's shaken us to such a deep degree, or as you're describing, it's pointed out like very few things ever have, how really truly interconnected we are. But it really has changed the world, and I think changed who we are. And I do think that we have some choice in deciding what that change ultimately looks like. What do we do? Back to the first arrow idea, what do we do when we're struck with an arrow like this? How do we respond to it? And I think what you're saying, which really would be reason for hope, is that it might be opening us up to loving better, to being more, feeling more like we're really part of the whole. And what happens to someone else is really affecting us, and vice versa. So I wonder if the few minutes we have before we turn this over to Tim, if you could guide us in a brief practice.
Oh, I'd be happy to. So picking up just on what Henry's been saying, I think we're looking at hope as our ability to use our love, our sense of interbeing, to grow possibilities for the future that we need to be designing out of the rubble all around us. So we're going to practice that now. And this is something then that I'll just lead you through, and that hopefully it's easy enough that you can do it on your own in the future if you like. I'm doing this every day, and it makes me happy. So just taking a moment, I think because of being in this course, you know how to get ready for meditation. So just coming into the body, it's kind of sensing your position the body is in. Be feeling the bottoms of your feet, feeling your hands, and coming right to the breath. And just following the breath all the way in, letting it kind of move the body to open and then to close as you exhale. And after you've kind of met the breath, now guide the breath directly into your heart. And doing this with long, slow, full breaths. Maybe the count of 5 in, count of 5 out, so the inhalation, exhalation match. And each time you inhale, letting the awareness ride that inhalation into the heart. And again until finally the awareness just kind of knows how to settle into your heart space. And now, using the vital imagination that you had at least until age 6 or 7, and hopefully still have today, using this vital imagination, place yourself in the midst of a fertile garden in springtime. So maybe you're seeing yourself here, or feeling yourself here, sensing yourself here, or telling yourself the story, whatever works for you. And feel the soil beneath you. Breathe in the lilacs, other blossoms of this time. See the delicate, multiple shades of green on the new leaves. Hear some birds. And sense the pulsing of new life through all these channels. Now bringing into the center with you someone or something that you love deeply and widely. Holding this mighty love in your arms, find that you are able to create soil. This is a soil you are making out of the profound love that you're experiencing right now. Feel it in your fingers. This, my friend, is the very love from which our future will be made, as many of us around the globe do this together. So you are the soil, it is your love, and now see seeds being sown. Maybe you're sowing them, maybe someone else is, or sprinkled into the soil. No need yet to figure out with your mind what the seeds are. That will come later. In this moment, you are embracing the soil made of your love for life. This is a seed bed for the future that we're creating now. Please return again and again, knowing that in the collective, we celebrate the love of each of us. Each is a little bit different from everyone else. We need them all. So, being here, breathing it in, knowing that you can return here anytime. And as you're ready, bringing your attention back to the breath as it moves in and out of your lungs. Coming back into the body, feeling your feet, bottoms of your feet, palms of your hands. And thank you so much for making this journey with me. I will see you in places of love all around us. We'll see each other there more and more. Thank you.
Well, Kaya, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. One of the things Kaya referred to early in that practice was having the imagination of a 6 or 7-year-old. And Dr. Tim Colbert that's his jam. And so he's going to talk about how, kids can really do this kind of thing. And in some ways, maybe really naturally.
Well, it's very, very true. Kids are so connected to their hearts, I think, naturally and easily as they're younger. Maybe it's in part because they have less defenses up and they've had less, I guess, less in the way of life experiences in some ways. But yes, I agree that, kids in general are so open from their hearts. And one thing we've been talking a lot about with the kids that we work with day to day is this concept of, one aspect of heart is the concept of compassion and self-compassion, and also concepts related to kindness. I think that these are very stressful times, and I am heartened to see how many children are really practicing a lot of compassion and kindness toward even simply their siblings, their brothers and their sisters that they've been sequestered with for the last 8 to 9 weeks. And I am really impressed, I think, with how much I see kids adapting and really, opening themselves to more love and patience and kindness in these difficult times. Compassion literally means to suffer together. It's that feeling that arises when you are confronted with another person's suffering, and then you feel motivated to want to relieve that suffering, to help. And I think that's a lovely theme to bring up in these difficult times with kids and just talk a little bit through. And so just so the parents out there are aware of this, we will have some lovely resources on the Natural Mental Health website. I made a book recommendation for kids about self-love called Find Your Happy, a kid's self-love book by Patricia May. There's a whole family online resource about self-compassion that I gave you the link to. And then also, there's really a lovely set of free behavioral charts that you can print out that review some of these concepts and practices that kids can engage in that help them to develop their self-compassion and kindness related skills. What's really cool about this, and Susan Kaiser Greenland talks about this in her book, The Mindful Child, is that you can practice and develop actually higher levels of empathy and compassion. These are trainable skills, they're not static. And I think that's what's so exciting for the kids to understand, is that as they move through these difficult times, if they can really learn to and practice regularly mindfulness and meditative practices and other mind-body skills, eventually they'll understand and see that they're better able to relate to what is happening within them emotionally and cognitively, as well as then tuning into what is happening around them. And that will enable them ultimately to respond to these situations that are difficult with more wisdom and compassion, which I think is a lovely thing. And you know, an easy example for kids is simply this. One way to explore with children kindness and compassion themes is just to role play situations. For example, you could discuss the idea that, let's say you're playing with your friends at recess and you notice one person alone who seems sad. What would you do in that situation? How might you respond? What could you do that would be helpful? You might notice that your father just came home from work and he has had a difficult day. Again, what could you do that would be helpful? How would you feel? And so I think these are easy ways to begin to engage children in these discussions about opening their hearts, getting out of their own little world, and really trying to think about and practice compassion. Interesting fact, research which followed children from the ages of 5 years old, so about kindergarten, out through the time that they were young adults, 25 years of age, showed that kids that demonstrated kindness behaviors in kindergarten were actually more likely to experience improved educational status, improved job prospects, and better mental health as adults. Isn't that interesting? So kindness pays off for all of us in so many ways. But you know, it's not just compassion and kindness toward others that's so important, but I think kids are not learning enough about and practicing enough of self-compassion, of course, being kind to themselves. I see in these difficult times that kids are actually getting depressed in the last couple of weeks because they're frustrated by the fact and disappointed by the fact that they cannot do the things they want to do or connect in a real way with their friends in person, for example. And so I think it's also important to move beyond compassion and talk a little bit about self-compassion and kindness to oneself as well. Also of note, studies do support that kids that learn self-compassion have better resilience, which is a theme we love to talk about here. They have more creativity, they have more in the way of general life success, and they have less depression and less anxiousness as they become adults. So again, really big payoffs when you learn these skills at very young ages. According to experts like Henry and Kaya, what they really talk about is that self-compassion has three components. The mindfulness of your own thoughts and feelings, a sense of common humanity, so understanding that you are not alone, and then self-kindness, treating yourself kindly and not being too self-critical. So what I thought was very nice is that there is a simple practice that we can teach to kids that basically has 3 steps that really embodies those principles and helps kids to not just develop self-kindness, but really apply it in the heat of the moment when they're having a hard time. Because, you know, many kids are noticing that day to day, more and more lately, they're really experiencing a lot of anger and frustration and disappointment. So a good example of a basic technique you could work with all these kids of any age on, adults included. Step 1 would be to notice that you're upset and just own it. So know that you are having a rough moment or a rough hour or a very difficult day, and just stop and notice that you are in fact upset. And acknowledge that you are having a hard time with some task or some person or some situation. So that's step number 1. I just think awareness basically. Step number 2 is accept it and really avoid making it worse by getting mad at yourself that you are in fact upset. don't think you're a bad person for feeling these emotions because you're upset or angry. Just know that it's okay to be having a rough moment or a rough day, and just sit with it, kind of be with it for a while and see where that goes. And then finally, I think that the step that is really helpful is know that you're not alone. Most everybody feels that way at some point in time. Take a moment to calm yourself, but then move beyond that, believe that it will get better, and just take a moment to love yourself. Be patient with yourself and give it some time to pass. So kind of a nice little 3-step technique for kids to develop self-compassion, which I think is part of this heart opening that Kaya and Henry so elegantly talked about. Own it, accept it, and believe it. And then for younger kids, you know, which is an age group, I guess, that would find this kind of approach maybe a little bit more difficult. A simpler game that I would suggest as well, another way to help them to experience the receiving of kindness and compassion, and also the giving of kindness and compassion to others. This is a game involving rolling a ball as you sit on the floor between you and a child, maybe, you know, your child, your son or your daughter, or a student, perhaps if you're a teacher or a therapist. But the idea is this: take the ball in hand, lock your eyes to the gaze of the child that you're working with, and then roll the ball their way as you say something positive to them, like, I really like your smile. I really enjoy the time that we spend together. I hope that you feel healthy and happy. And then ask the child to say something nice to you and about you, and roll the ball back. And you can kind of take turns going back and forth like this. But many of us notice that we're uncomfortable accepting kind and positive thoughts from others about us. And so I think it's a good way to practice that. And also, again, to help kids to develop ways to learn to compliment others as a way of showing kindness to them. So just some interesting thoughts and exercises you can begin to work with the younger kids on, and that can be very helpful. And then finally, I will mention this. There are some practices related to this concept called loving kindness, which is a lovely way to practice a meditative experience or strategy. And with practice, this is a very useful tool as well. And if you practice loving kindness regularly, again, it really helps people in the long run to develop a host of lovely talents and traits, such as being able to more easily connect with others, and to feel more kind and open more of the time, and to be more patient, amongst other things. And so what you'll find on the Natural Mental Health website is we've created a loving kindness meditation for kids. I call it The Glow. And it's all about developing this feeling of heartfelt kindness and love and compassion. And then first sharing it with yourself, and then sharing it with others. So take a look at that if you get a chance as well. But just some basic ideas about a kid's spin on this concept of opening the heart. All right, and I think we have a little bit of time left, and we can probably take some questions.
Well, Tim, those are just such great ideas. And as always, I'm impressed at how applicable the things you talk about for kids are for us adults. So it's a lot of, it's just a different way to learn what we can do for ourselves.
We all have to keep in touch with our inner child.
Yes, indeed. Well, here's a question that is really relevant, and you know, really talking about a realistic challenge today. And I'll read it, and maybe we could all chime in. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Kaya. I'll say a couple of things, and then I'll maybe open it up. But question is, how can we support colleagues who have been laid off when we are still employed by the company? I feel like they don't want to hear it from me because I'm still employed, but I want to offer support and hope. Well, you may be right about that. It's hard to hear this from you because you're still employed, but you also might not be right about that. I think unless they have outright said that that's what's going on, you don't really know. And I think this is a similar question that I often hear about how do we interact with somebody who's really struggling with a mental health problem, depression or bipolar illness or something like that. And I've often thought that the best way to do that is to imagine that they don't have something wrong, that they're just like you or anyone else, and so interact with them and treat them in the same way that you would normally do. In other words, be as normal with them as you possibly can. And I think that your colleague who's not there anymore would greatly appreciate if you reached out. And so don't imagine what they're thinking or feeling. If they outright say they don't really want to hear from you because you're still there, then and that I'd respect that. But I also think they would greatly value, just a check-in, reaching out, how you doing? So sorry you're not here anymore. I miss you. Those kinds of things. Kaya, do you have any other thoughts to add about that?
Well, I support, Henry, what you're saying to that avenue, the bridge you're making of just treating the person like yourself, like they're normal, like there's nothing wrong, so to speak. And then I think once that's been established, then as you listen to them through their voice tone, I don't know if you can see them maybe on Zoom, whatever, that then you'll have an opportunity to know what other topics might be brought up. And I think through just your willingness to contact this person, they'll be able to know that you've got an open heart for hearing how things are going for them. So I'd say, because you care enough to ask that question, go ahead the way Henry suggested, and then just trust that things will keep unfolding, and you'll know what to do. And none of us are perfect. We don't. That's an illusion we got to let go of with this, all the viruses brought. So we just do the best we can, and that's pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Well, here's another challenge that's just real at this point in time. Maybe let Tim have first crack at this, but here's the question. My kids feel devastated that they may not be back at school next year. They're middle schoolers. I'm devastated too. How can I offer them hope or offer them a glimmer of hope that this can be a time of growth and enjoyment?
That's a difficult one, but it is one that we talked a little bit about in a couple of other sessions, in the sense that, I think that this is where maybe a mindfulness approach, learning that skill and practicing that skill can be so helpful, because, some of these emotions that they are feeling, devastation, disappointment, anger, frustration, are really intense emotions and can be big emotions. And I think that maybe to reframe this, and first of all, be able to take some of the intensity and negativity out of those emotional feelings can be helpful. So that's where I do think practicing some of these mindfulness strategies can be helpful, to be able to step back and have a more balanced perspective on really that mind-heart connection, and getting away from some of the worries that might be driving that, amongst other things. But I think the second thing is, as a family, this could be approached on a more global level, or a whole family level, in the sense that, you could, as a family, take the opportunity to understand and be honest about the fact that this is all disappointing, but come up with some ideas for let's say, the course of the next 3 months over the summer, because a lot of camps and other activities have also been canceled. I'm hearing about this a lot. But maybe come up with some realistic plans that, as a family, you can deliver on, and take this time to maybe reestablish and explore some new connections as a family, and new activities and new skills you could develop together that maybe are more realistic and doable in the current circumstance. Maybe not quite as much fun or as much excitement as you thought they would be, but I think having a plan and sticking to a schedule and creating some potential planful, scheduled future activities is really important at this time.
Well, I think we'll take one last question. We're actually right at our time, but I think it'd be nice to end with this question. And Kaya, maybe I'll have you start, with responding, because it's a little bit similar to something you said earlier in your comments. So it's talking really about feeling mad, getting angry or upset. For example, if others are not following the physical distancing and mask guidelines, or another example, just with all of this political drama and, kind of infighting right in the middle of this public health crisis. So.
Well, that's a big one. I think many of us are, baffled by that. I guess maybe just with the time we've got, a couple of things I might say is that with your anger, claim that anger, because the wisdom base, according to Buddhism, of anger is clear seeing. So let yourself know that you're seeing something that's unequal, unfair, unsafe, and just kind of claim your ability to see that, so that you can kind of move into the wisdom base rather than the self-righteousness that, at least for me, always comes with anger when I'm glad I'm smarter than someone else or whatever. That's there too. And then I think the next thing I would say is, we're all so afraid now. And so if you can come at times into your own fear and notice what that's like. And like Tim was saying, bringing in loving kindness for yourself, because it's really hard to be afraid. And then what I'm guessing when I hear those people, when I learn about them, when I see them in the street, is that they're really afraid, and just like I am. And so that gives me a sense of not being separate from them, knowing that I share fear with them, and which may not in every moment give me an idea of what to do, but sometimes it will. And like the little reference I made, I was in a store, and the person ahead of me was saying, "Oh, all these people with blankety blank, starts with an F, masks. Why are they so afraid they have to wear them?" So I just thought, I took a breath and I just said, "Gee, I hope you're not going to make fun of me because I've got a mask on," because it seems to me like the best way forward. And he got very kind and said, "Oh, I won't get mad at you." So you see, what I did was sort of come at him as though he would be able to nurture me in some way if I didn't respond directly to what he was talking about. So those are just a couple of examples. But I think it's a great question. I think it's something really helpful for all of us to talk about with our friends now, because we need to find ways forward that help the others feel like we're all in this together. So that's all I can
Thank
think
you.
of.
That's great. Well, Kaya, again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's just such a pleasure to be doing this with you. And this is our last time. And so I want to just take a moment to say how grateful we are to all of you who have been with us and joined for however much you've done. I want to thank all of the guest speakers who have been part of this, and especially thanks to Tim and Amy. You guys have put a lot into this, and your comments have been great, Tim. And Amy, really, this is kind of your baby. You've done so much to create all of this and make it work so well, and even dealing with some of the technological glitches we've had.
Thank you.
Yeah, so many blessings to everyone, and please stay in touch with us at Natural Mental Health. Sign up for our emails. We're going to be doing more things that will pop up like this, or maybe even some more long or extended programs. So please look for that. Sign up for emails so you don't miss it, and we sure hope to continue to be in touch with you.